Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. In this two-part series, Jack Schonely and I talk with Kodey Bogart. During this series, we explore Kodey's career and impact within the aviation industry, highlighting her remarkable path from military service as a Black Hawk pilot to her current role as an industry safety expert and author. During the conversation, Kodey shares her insights on the critical importance of safety practices in aviation, the vital role helicopters play in emergency response, and the collaboration between drones and helicopters during disaster situations. We'll discuss the significance of community service, particularly in the context of hurricane responses. Kodey reflects on her time in flight school and military deployment, emphasizing peer support and the evolution of crew responsibilities. She recounts memorable missions and the unique camaraderie formed during high-stress situations, alongside challenges faced during the transition to civilian life. We'll also dive into the pressing issues within law enforcement aviation, such as recruitment and retention, and explore the advocacy for women in aviation. Kodey also discusses her children's book series, Helo Girls, which aims to educate and inspire children. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Wysong Enterprises, and Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
Hey, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host, John Gray, coming to you from the Hangar Z studios powered by a camping generator. As we record this, it's the beginning of January 2025. Almost said 24. And California's being besieged by our wonderful Santa Ana winds. All the LA firestorms are kind of winding down right now, but the Santa Anas are not. So as a preventative measure, the power company has cut our power, and we've plugged in our camping generator to make this all happen. So fingers crossed it works out.
As long as the Z is lit up, we're good to go.
That's right. With us today to co-host and host in this conversation is Commander Jack Schonely. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, John. Very good. I have power, but I'm glad you made it work. Good job.
I know you always cringe when I call you Commander, and I don't know why I call you Commander.
I don't know either. I have no idea. It's about 10 ranks above whatever I was actually in reality, but that's okay.
Well, Commander, it's good to have you aboard. Thanks for joining us. It's been a chaotic week as we've covered the wildfires, and
very chaotic.
The conversation we're having today is a really exciting one for me. It's something that we've been talking about as we discussed offline for nearly 5 years. We met at AppsCon back in 21, I believe, either 20 or 21 in New Orleans. And we were I was in Brian Smith's safety course, which is fantastic, by the way. And we got a chance to meet, and we talked about the podcast. And again, it only took 4 or 5 years, however that math works out, to make it happen.
It's better late than never.
Yes. We did get this scheduled for last week, and lo and behold, I had a power outage last week, and we had to reschedule. So here we are. We're going to make this happen. I'm honored to introduce our guest, who, and I am humbled to have on the podcast. You look at all the stuff that she's accomplished over the course of her career. It's really cool. It makes me feel real small. Thank you for that.
Oh.
I'm just kidding.
Sorry? Not sorry?
But she's the CEO of KV Solutions and the author of a really cool book series called Helo Girls. So I'd like to introduce Kodey Bogart. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, John and Commander. Jack, I'm really excited. I'm going to try to keep that as your title from now on. I love it. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. And John, 4 or 5 years in the making. I've been following you guys. It's amazing what you're doing. So I'm quite honored to be here as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah,
welcome, Kodey.
Going back to those early days, I was pretty convinced in those early days that it was just going to be my mom listening, and she did. She was the biggest fan that I had, and
here we are, quite a ways down the road, and I'm humbled again to have guests like you that join us on the podcast, and people like you really make this show what it is. You know, if it was just Jack and I up here talking, I think you might have a couple listeners, but pretty quickly they'd fall off. So
yeah, my dad would be listening too, but that's and he'd even get tired of it after about 10 minutes. We're lucky to have wonderful guests, aren't we?
Yes, absolutely. Again, going back to your background, you know, it seems like you've had some work in every single segment within the helicopter industry. You're educationally trained, like there's the full package when it comes to the aviation world. So I'm really excited to talk about, you know, your HEMS industry experience, your law enforcement experience, your safety experience, which is really a big part of what we're trying to push forward on the podcast is, you know, trying to encourage safety practices that make our industry safer and better.
Absolutely.
So excited to hear what you're doing with that, and really excited to hear about Helo girls. You know, we talk about recruitment and retention a lot in the podcast. And as we know, it starts from the early age, you know, encouraging young boys and girls to pursue the passion of aviation.
Mm-hmm.
The book series you've created 100% does that. So really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So, as Jack says, let's go back in time to young Kodey and tell us a little bit about where you grew up and a little bit about your background and how you ended up where you are.
I was born in, no, I'm just kidding.
That's okay.
So actually,
you can start there if you want, Kodey.
That's a little too far back, I think, from your podcast. I reside in Florida right now, but I grew up in Michigan. And I will tell you, it's interesting, though I've always been fascinated with flights and what it represents, I really never thought I would go into aviation. In fact, you know, I love adventure. I love being outside. So I think I'm a natural fit, but I always grew up and wanted to be an art professor. So, which is quite a drastic change. But so I realized as I got older, first of all, there's not a lot of money to be made unless you're like a professor at a college doing, you know, art history or teaching, you know, like that. So I figured I could fly helicopters and do art on the side, or, you know, would be much more of a challenge to do art and fly helicopters on the side.
Yeah.
Right. So that wasn't ideal. But really what drew me in aviation is really kind of funny. When I was in high school, my brother joined the military and we didn't have the best home life. So I had a stepfather who was not the nicest to our mother. So when he joined the military, I was still at home and I had a younger sister and I was like, man, I just really want to get out of here too. So I enlisted in the Navy so I could be close to my brother. That was my whole plan. I wanted to be on the same ship as him. I just wanted to be near him. And then during my senior year in high school, I actually got my first real boyfriend, if you will. And he was in the Florida Army National Guard. And so, you know, the way young girls think is I'm going to be with this person forever. So I got out of the delayed entry program with the Navy and I signed up to join the Florida Army National Guard. Maybe not the best reason of why to join, but you know, you take those nuggets in life and you make the best of them. And I did the most amazing thing that any child should never do. And I went to the recruiter and I was like, listen, I just want to go this week. So whatever job you want me to do is fine.
Oh, his eyes lit up, didn't they?
Yeah.
I highly encourage nobody to ever do that.
No.
Have I got a job for you?
Yes. Right. They have quotas they have to fill. So I actually, he made me a truck driver, which was a great job. It was fun. It was entertaining. I got to do some traveling around Florida, especially for hurricane relief, because I was active duty for the Florida Guard for 12 years. So I wasn't just one of those weekend warriors, because you need people full time to maintain the assets and all the stuff, right? Has to be maintained by somebody. So during this time, I went on a morale flight in a Black Hawk, and I call it my chiclets moment. I wish I had the picture with me right now, but I was like nothing but teeth. Like my smile was so big. I was sitting in the crew chief seat, and I was like, this is what I need to be doing. Only to find out that I could not because of my eyesight. Mm-hmm. So I ended up switching. One thing really neat about the Guard is you can move around. You have a lot more flexibility in what you want to do. So I transitioned from that skill identifier to human resources. And I went up to St. Augustine and I worked there full time at state headquarters in the HR department. And everyone knew I still wanted to be a helicopter pilot. It just wasn't in the cards until one day, a gentleman who is still my mentor to this day, Gary Glover, he's like, Kodey, the Army and the Navy have gotten together for a research study program on refractive surgery. You should apply. And I was like, oh man, I should apply. So nervous. But I did, and I was accepted into the study. So that was like a huge catalyst. I went and did my AFAST, so my flight aptitude test, had to do my flight physical and all that. And I went in front of a board of people I had known for years at state headquarters. So they knew me professionally, and there were 2 flight seats available and only 1 applicant. And
wow.
It was like the stars completely aligned.
Wow.
It was really neat. So that's what got me into it. It's not somewhere I ever thought I would be. It was just a passion of, I like to be saturated and busy. I work well under high pressure, high intense situations. And I saw these gentlemen flying this helicopter, and I was like, that's it. This is where I need to be sitting.
That's cool.
That's really incredible. 1 flight and you were hooked.
Yes. All in.
A lot of people get that 1 flight somehow.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that's cool about law enforcement. Most aviation programs do offer ride-alongs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening and you're considering going to aviation, definitely try and get a flight. It's not difficult. In fact, I think that education of a patrol officer, understanding the capabilities of what we can do in the ship, benefits not only that person, but that person's crew when they go back to their patrol briefing and kind of go over what's capable. But it's really neat that 1 flight really transformed your entire life from thereafter.
Yep.
So talk about the selection process. Once you were selected, what happened from there?
So when I went off to flight school, I think it was May of 2004. So I went off, I was enlisted at the time. I was actually just getting ready to go up for E6. So I was an E5 sergeant. And then when I went off to flight school, we go through a warrant officer candidate school, which is really neat because I was 23 at the time, and I was the old lady in the class. There's just a bunch of young kids who this is their first time in the military or their high school, the flight school, so they're 18. It was really fun. But I love the military. I again, that liking to be outdoors, adventurous. I am all in for something, all the time. Like, I've never done that. Let's give it a go. So it was a really neat fit. But I went through warrant officer basic course, and I absolutely loved it. I love regimented stuff. I love structure and standardization. So then right after warrant officer basic course, went straight into flight school at Fort Rucker, which now is Fort Novacell, which I have a hard time remembering to say.
Yeah, that's tough for a lot of people, isn't it? After, so long, these bases being one thing.
Yeah, you call it Mother Rucker because you're always going back to your mom, right? Because you always go back to Fort Rucker for training and recurrency. But now it's like going to Fort Novacell. Great man, not knocking the name, but just a different way. That muscle memory kicks right in when you want to call it home.
You talked about adventure and something that comes to mind. I'm sure when you were in your first assignment as a truck driver, transiting all over Florida and then responding to the wildfire efforts, can you think of something that was either adventurous or funny that you found yourself in a position doing in that assignment as a truck driver?
Yeah, so there's one story that comes to mind. I think it's funny. So I'm going to back up just a smidge. So when I joined the military, I had to get a waiver to join because I was underweight. I weighed 96 pounds, which was normal. I was a healthy, kid. I was healthy 17-year-old. And they're like, no, you need to be 98 pounds or something. So my recruiter gave me this whole gallon of water, big sandwich, and you're going to eat all this and we're going to wait it out until you gain this 2 pounds or whatever it was. But they didn't want me to join because I was underweight, which was such a weird thing. So anyway, I come out, basic training and all that stuff. And that was 1997. And I came out of basic training and all that. And I was 115 pounds. And I pretty much just stayed that for the majority of my life. But why I bring that up is one funny thing is we were headed down to the Keys after a hurricane for relief. So we had, the big 18-wheeler truck we were driving down as a 5-ton. And I can't remember what town we were in. I was at a stoplight and my accelerator wouldn't work anymore. It's there was no resistance, no nothing. So I just kind of, put the hazards on, and the sergeant that was with me in the vehicle, so I think I was an E2 or an E3 at the time. He got out of the vehicle to go to a nearby fast food restaurant to call back to our commander to be like, hey, we're broke down. So meanwhile, I get out of this 5-ton. I go to the front, and if you ever seen the hood, it's like this T-bar handle in the front that you just have to pull and yank towards you, and like the hood lifts, opposite of normal, the way a car hood would lift.
Yeah.
And they're pretty heavy. So I lifted this hood, which is I was fully capable of doing. I set it. I go into my throttle linkage, and I reconnect the throttle linkage, and I pull it to the fast food restaurant. And I'm like, all right, womp, womp, let's go.
That's great.
That's
So
cool.
I'm not one to take like no determination. Like, we got this mission. We're going to go. We're trying to go help some people. Like, let's just get there, and we can get the maintainers to look at it once we're there.
That's impressive.
That's really cool.
Yeah. The hurricane response is always really interesting to me. Florida's obviously dealt with that forever. But it seems like this last year with the hurricanes that came through, it was very catastrophic. And, from an outsider's perspective, it's pretty scary, I'd imagine, as a resident, knowing that's coming down. But then you're in a position as a National Guardsman to respond to that. Can you talk about what that was like as a young E2 or E3 responding to that, and some of the stuff that you saw and learned over the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to, obviously I love helping other people. That's something that's kind of carried me through my life is, I'm always one to step up. So as a service member, especially a young service member, I liked it because I wasn't tied down with, I didn't have family, I didn't have children, or a spouse or anything like that. So to get up and go was exciting. I'm like, yes, like send me, let's go. The trepidation of the hurricanes coming is really just about preparation. And that's the hard part about, what you guys are experiencing in California with the fires. You don't always plan to have a fire. I mean, you want certain things to function at the time, but, hurricanes, lately, we have such an opportunity to get so far in front of it. We might know 2 weeks out, right? So I can prep my generators and get my fuel and I'll get food and all that stuff, or choose to evacuate. So I think as a young person, it was like, I'm just living in an apartment anyway, like, peace out.
Yeah, right.
Let's go do this. I'm going to go have fun with my friends in the military and go help some people. And so I really enjoyed that aspect, and, seeing the faces of it's more intimate because it's your community, right? These are your people that you're helping. So there's just a lot of passion that comes with that. Yeah.
I think the hurricanes and this wildfire really highlight the capabilities of the helicopter industry. Katrina, the 20-year anniversary of Katrina's this year. And Katrina, I think, was the one major event that we look back on and really saw the capability of helicopters and how they stood up and did the work for our country, which was really cool.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to celebrating that and those accomplishments this year. But you see it again in all the responses we had last year between Florida, what happened in North Carolina and in that segment of the country, and then now the wildfires in Los Angeles. It's just really neat to see this tool, the helicopter, this machine that we all love to fly and be a part of, such a fixture in this part of the response to these things. It's inspiring to me,
Yeah, and I think drones are interesting, and I love them. I have one, but there was a fear a few years ago. You're like, man, our profession might be done because of drones or autonomy, right? And that still may happen in the future, but as of right now, you can see how invaluable a helicopter is, and the person who flies it, right? The crew that maintain it and keep it going. It's just unlike any other thing. It's not like a drone. It's not going to be the same.
Right. Yeah, we've talked about drone stuff quite a bit, and I feel like personally, drones are going to be complementary to what we're doing. They already are.
Yep.
But I think the more we kind of figure out how do we work together, and that really comes into focus as these policies are defined and as procedures and departmental policies are identified, we'll really see like these really do work well together, not necessarily in opposition to each other. So it's kind of been cool for me to see that come into focus. Jack, I know you've kind of got similar thoughts.
Thanks to our sponsor, AEM, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
Oh yeah, I think what Kodey, what you just talked about, the first reaction by the helicopter industry in general, that was just a human reaction. That wasn't reality. That was just a threat. Hey, whoa, they're going to take away my job, kind of thing. And when you stood back And we all thought that. Let's face it, we all thought something similar to that. But when you step back from it and looked at it, you went, no, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. They're going to be able to do things with drones that we can't do. That's a fact. But there's things that we do that they can't do. And certainly in law enforcement, that's true. Certainly in firefighting, that's true. And public service is part of it. But it was interesting to see that, how the feelings about drones evolved from going, that's the worst thing, to bring it on. Let's enhance it. I mean, we just had a conversation with Clay Lacey about that at length, about how they're integrating the drone program with the manned aviation program. And the integration is resulting in captures that you wouldn't have happened with just that aviation asset.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great teamwork. So
yeah, and like John said, it's a collaboration. The two things working together are phenomenal.
It is. It's a great thing now. But that knee-jerk reaction, boy, oh boy, everybody's
emotional
going,
response first. Usually that was what happens, right? So we're all like,
that's the best way to put it. It was completely emotional. It wasn't based on facts, reality, experience, and all the other important things.
But most people don't like change, right? We're a sedentary people.
That's it too.
So you interject change to us, they're like, whoa, no, thank you.
Yeah, especially law enforcement. Yeah. Oh my God, change. That's a naughty word. And
what's the saying? Something like police officers don't like the way it is and they hate change, or something similar to that.
Yes.
So it's going to continue to stay the way it is then?
Perfect.
Yeah. I think one of the things drone wise that's really exciting to me is HIMSS related, and really I guess it's a cargo related topic. But when you think of organ transplants and the air crews that currently fly organs from hospital to hospital, I think about the LA basin and how many days during the year it's an IFR type flight environment. And now the drones, automated drones, come in and kind of take in bring in the capability of transporting an organ in an otherwise unsuitable flight environment from one hospital to the other, saving lives. I think stuff like that is going to be really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Develop. Yeah. So Jack, I know you know everything about IFR days in LA.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When that marine layer comes in low, you can't see your hand in front of your face sometimes. Mm-hmm. And, you want to go out and work, but it's impossible. Absolutely impossible.
And Florida's the exact opposite of LA in a lot of ways. You've got weather all the time and it changes so fast.
Yeah, I think one lucky for us, though, is the only mountains we have are usually rubbish dumps, right? So it's relatively flat. Maybe a little bit hilly around Tallahassee, but, I know if I maintain my altitude or climb a little bit, I'm still going to be okay. There's no mountains around like you have to deal with in California, which...
Yeah. But you have antenna towers that seem to go into outer space.
That altitude, right?
Going back to your initial flying career, you come out of Rucker. Where do you get assigned and what do you do from there?
Yeah, so when I went to flight school, luckily another good thing about the Guard is I knew what unit I was in or going to be going to. I knew what aircraft I was going to fly. So when I went to flight school, I was all stoked because I was going to be flying the Apache. And then mid-flight school, the Florida National Guard decided to switch from Apaches to Blackhawks and Chinook at that unit, which makes complete sense for a state mission, right? For hurricane response and other disasters that we would help with. It makes complete sense to have Blackhawks and Chinooks. So they're like, you can be a Blackhawk pilot, fly your ambulance, or you can fly the Chinook. And I was like, well, can I still go to the Apache course first? Which did not happen, but that's okay. So I chose the Blackhawk because it's a really diverse aircraft. I mean, you could do utility, cargo, you could put Hellfire missiles on it, whatever. It's just a real diverse platform. The Chinook is great too, but for me, the Blackhawk really worked. So that's what I chose to fly. I also knew when I was going to flight school that not long after I got home, we were going to be going to Iraq. So I had that in my head too, which was fine with me. Again, young, excited. I couldn't wait to do what I had been training to do, and to help out with that experience there. But, I thought flight school was amazing. Getting home was really good. Getting integrated in, because I was a warrant officer, I was not a hard bar. So getting integrated into the aviation realm. I remember I was working at state headquarters in the finance department in our aviation unit. And I had a work order for a tow bar. And I look at the head finance guy, I'm like, what the heck is a tow bar? He's like, call the unit, speak to this person, ask them if they can explain to you what a tow bar is. You've done W1. So I call on this. They were very nice on the other end. I'm sure everyone had a big laugh while Kodey got educated on what a tow bar was.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't in aviation before. It's not like I was a crew chief, going into to become a pilot, which is a standard case. So I was learning everything.
That's funny.
I thought everyone was really great. I think everything goes back to personality. I'm not shy. I don't shy away from hard things. And if I don't know something, I will do everything I can to make it a strength. And so, and all the crew chiefs would see me on the shop floor consistently sitting in the engine cowling, doing, what's this? If I take a bullet here, what does that mean? What does it look like to me in the flight deck? What do I do? It just constantly learning and evolving. And I think that really helped out a lot.
Yeah, that natural curiosity is so important. Mm-hmm. So many times I see flight crews, they'll land, get on the flight, walk through the maintenance hangar and go right to their desk. I'm like, wait, if you have an opportunity to do what you just described, you'll make yourself a better pilot, a better crew person. It's so beneficial. So I love that you pointed that out. I think it's 100% true.
Yeah, and I like doing that stuff with my crew chiefs too. That helped me out, right?
Yeah.
So when I was flying law enforcement, my TFO, I would do that with him. Like I would talk about the traffic pattern. I'm like, oh, there's someone on downwind. Can you tell me where downwind is? It's a left or a right, or like involve everybody so everybody knows what's going on. It's fun.
Was it overwhelming at times? I mean, you're getting flooded with new information. You're now an officer. That's a big step by itself.
Yeah.
Right. And now you're not only an officer, but you're a helicopter pilot, and also you haven't had any experience in that. You add all that up. That's a heavy load. Was it overwhelming in the beginning at times, or did you handle that pretty well?
I think I handled it well. I think the good thing for me in flight school is I had a very strong peer group, where we could all get together and we could talk. In fact, we would spend almost every night in the library. We had one of our peers, he was a little bit weaker on some things during our primary phase. And so the rest of us would teach him every night, and thereby teaching ourselves, right, and getting that rote memorization down. But we just all had each other. And I think that really helped.
I'm sure it did.
But when it came to Friday or Saturday nights, the books are away and the kids all played. We would go out, have a good time, socialize, and let that go. I do remember during flight school, so you take a test, well, at least historically you took a test. It was like once or twice a week you were tested on something. And the only test I ever failed was on weather, and it had to do with fog. And it was like 4 or 5 questions, and it was completely my fault because the night before, I was doing my flashcards. I was like, I got fog. I am not concerned about that. And I set those cards to the side and I continued with the rest. Big mistake. Even if you think, you know what, study it.
That's right.
Because you might not know it as well as you think you do.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good lesson for students listening on any topic. Yeah. But certainly weather. Weather was one that I think I'd say the majority of young pilots getting into it are intimidated by that part of it. They grasp the flight part, they're grasping the mechanical part, the systems. And then they get the weather and they go, I'm not a weatherman. What the heck, and they kind of just either don't like it or they're intimidated by it. And next thing you know, they struggle with it. It's one of the things you just have to learn, because you've learned later in life that's the thing that's going to kill you, So you better understand fog and ice fog and all those things, because those things, especially in a military setting where you're flying in the elements intentionally at times, right? You really have to know that stuff.
Yeah. So, I think that's for what worked for me. I like high tense, high stress environments. I seem to find this weird calmness that has carried me through some difficult times, flying certain missions. But I think having a strong peer group that's where the jam is at. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it speaks to the culture that we develop within our respective units and agencies. It's why it's so important to develop those positive cultures, because if you have a negative one, it totally detracts from what you're describing. It makes almost the exact opposite of that.
I would say it's really neat too. Here I am 20 years later, and I was just texting with one of the guys the other day because I'm going to be up where he lives in in South Carolina. So I was like, hey, where are you at? Love to get together for dinner and, see the wife and, all hang out. So it's those relationships, they carry even outside of being together all the time.
Sure.
Right. You brought something up that I want to touch on for a second. You talked about teaching your crew members, your TFO in particular, where left downwind is or right downwind. And I think about how things have changed in our industry for the better, as far as, there used to be this line down the middle of the cockpit, and the pilot does the pilot stuff and the TFO does the TFO stuff, and there's no blending of the two. Now it seems like there's much more camaraderie when it comes to sharing some of these responsibilities of flight, because when it comes to safety, it's everybody's responsibility. If you've got a TFO next to you and he sees a potential hazard in aircraft and he's like, it's right there. And you're like, well, where's right there?
Where's there?
If that TFO can say left downwind, 2 o'clock, whatever, it really changes the time in which it allows you as a pilot to identify that hazard and mitigate it.
Absolutely. And then when I flew with the sheriff's office, and I know we'll probably talk more about that in a bit, but the TFO is not a pilot. They are an observer and they are a medic in the organization that I was in. So there was no flight controls on that side of the aircraft. And so I would always think, like, what if we had a bird strike, or what if I had a heart attack and we're flying and I'm the only person who has controls? And I would say, hey, what are you going to do if this happens? How would you react? And we would talk about that scenario. And luckily I'm a little smaller. So I was like, you could just throw me back off the controls. And then I would say, hey, I want you to reach across, and I want you to grab the psychic and the collective, and I want you to move them from your seat. And, if anything, there's an opportunity for them to, right, we probably still have an accident, but they could probably soften that accident just a bit to ensure that everybody walked away. So it's really important to involve. And, I'm so glad we moved away from the attitudes of like Tenerife, right? That big accident that occurred and lost so many lives, that, we're all in the same aircraft. We're all going to go to the same place, whether we like it or not. So you have a say. And in the military, I wouldn't move an engine power control lever without my crew chief saying, yep, that's engine number 1 or engine number 2, move it, So it was we're all in it together.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell that TFO to open the door and push you out.
You know what? If that's what they needed to do, if I was kaputs, then.
The incapacitated pilot scenario is something that is really serious. And as much as we talked about it in Ontario, the practical training that followed that up was very difficult to do for a lot of reasons. I think every agency kind of struggles with the ability to implement that type of training. Jack, I think you guys did it from time to time.
It was a program.
Yeah.
It was an established, it was called EFT, Emergency Flight Training.
So how often did the TFO participate in that training?
Well, not often enough, but keep in mind we have, 25 TFOs. So that's a lot, dragging them away to give them a flight lesson for something that probably won't occur, but it could occur. So we're going to do it. And I will say that as you were talking about it, Kodey, I was thinking back to the time, probably late 90s, when they said, we're yanking the controls out of the left side for the TFO controls because TFOs are bumping them.
Yeah.
And there was a rebellion. I mean, there was a rebellion saying 1 heart attack should not kill 2 people.
Yeah. Yep.
And reaching across is very challenging and difficult. Could it be done? Yeah, it could, with a lot of practice. But wouldn't it be better to expose a TFO to some minimal training that they can get control and get to a location where they can do a shallow approach to a run-on landing on a runway? Yes, that's a better choice. So EFT was done. And now that they have a simulator, by the time this airs, that will be very well known. The simulator is going to be at LA, going to be the EFT training zone. They will still go out and do it in a helicopter, but less often. The simulator is so realistic. It's a loft dynamic simulator that it'll be a great trainer for EFT, because we thought it was important, and they still do.
Yeah, I'm used to the title being a pinch hitter course.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing. It's just one, and we never, in the history of the unit, there's never been a case where it had to be deployed. However, there's been some close ones, and one that I'm thinking of is a kidney stone. A pilot with a kidney stone issue. And I've never had a kidney stone, but I have lots of friends that have. And then they said it's the most excruciating pain they've ever had in their life. And you have that when you're coming in for a landing, that's going to be a challenging landing. And they actually considered giving the controls to TFO and diverting from the heliport to a runway. And then the pilot fought through it and was able to do it. But the point is that it can and will happen.
Yeah.
A laser strike. Pilot's blinded by a laser. Now what? Oh, it's going to kill both of us? It shouldn't. No, we have to do something to mitigate that factor. So that's why the program was established and still goes.
Like Kodey said, the bird strike, or as we saw in the LA fire, is a drone strike. Unfortunately, if a drone strike happens and it hits a pilot, that pilot's going to be incapacitated. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Yep, and it's going to happen, unfortunately, as we've seen. But you brought up Loft, and I really love Loft Dynamics and the simulator they've created. I'm excited to see how that changes the industry, to be a safer industry. One, from, you talk about the double IMC scenarios, but two, these pinch hitter TFO training classes, these air crew members who don't have the ability to get up as frequently as they'd like to and participate in this kind of training. This, I think, will change things and put things in their favor if this were to occur. So I'm really excited about that.
Right.
So do you get a chance to participate in the Loft VR training yet?
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
No, I have not.
It's amazing.
Put it higher on your list for VAI.
Okay.
Go over there first thing in the morning on the first day and get signed up. Kodey,
check it. Yeah.
You will be amazed. It is
I'm not the best
really
in simulator, so if it's too,
nope.
I'm
That's
not a
cool
simulator
thing.
fan.
Well, are you talking about the motion where you just don't feel well?
Yeah, if I'm in a full motion, it's usually all right. But if it's being just in front of a screen, there's like conflict happening. But I can do it. I just have to talk myself through.
It is full motion.
Yeah. Okay.
Six degrees of motion, but with VR goggles. And one of the things that is neat about the VR goggles, it reduces that queasiness that many people have in simulators. Many people, lots of pilots, and they go into VR with the VR goggles and full motion on the Loft, and they go, "I'm good to go." They don't feel it at all. So I bet we'll see you there.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I know my kids have the Meta, and they have like a roller coaster SpongeBob thing, and I put that on, and I do okay. It's not bad, but it's not my favorite. Disney, any of those? No, thank you. Yeah, I'm willing to bet, and we'll go there with you if you want, and we'll videotape you doing it. Competition, you can make it long
and see what you think. But I bet you'll like it. It feels incredible. It's very realistic, and it's going to save lives and all the things that John just mentioned, especially double IMC. But the EFT program, boy, oh boy, that's a game changer, because most departments say, oh, it's too expensive to train our TFOs to fly. Well, we're not training them to fly. We're training them to land, and if they can just get that, we're going to accomplish what we're getting at. With the simulator, they could do that in a half an hour. They can do 20 approaches and landings if you set it up that way. You don't have to go have them do the pattern. You just take them back to 700 feet, 2 miles out, and say, land on that runway. And you do it over and over and over.
Yeah, and it's really good for the TFO, right? And it's good for us as pilots to have that cross knowledge, that sharing. Again, we're both in that aircraft together. Let's do what we can to help each other out, Yep. If I'm experiencing a situation, hey, can you call out my engine temp gauges? And I don't know, whatever you might need help with in scanning, use that person. They're not just there to pull weight in the front seat.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Well, this question I'm going to ask isn't a part of the outline, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I'm very curious to hear your insight. Being so involved in the safety part of our industry, we're always talking about double IMC and our kind of reactions to those and how we improve our operations and improve safety as it pertains to that. From your perspective, how do you think our industry goes forward improving safety as it pertains to double IMC type incidents and training?
That's a great question. I have my CFI and my double I, and I taught in a Schweitzer, which is just a teeny little bubble, but it's a great trainer aircraft.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not training as we fight, right? It's not an IFR aircraft. Someone's getting an IFR certificate who has never gone IFR, right? So maybe we need to look at how to make those type of aircraft more accessible for students to experience true, inadvertent weather, true, your vestibular system, the way it reacts when you're IFR it's a unique feeling that you have to overcome. I love the 56 seconds to live video by the AI. It's really good. And it is, you have to react quickly. So maybe we look at it incorporating a couple of those hours have to be in an aircraft that can actually go into IMC weather, so you can get that exposure. Another thing is I think we should really look at the way we train in a simulator. If you're a Part 135 operator and you go to the same training organization, you're probably doing the same ILS approach into an airport that you do every year that you go. Let's get some true scenario-based training. Let's change it up. Let's change not the standard, but the situation that we put in ourselves year after year. Maybe there's a packet and it's a 5-year packet. Year 1, you do this, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you might rotate through that after that 5 years. But let's diversify our training, so you're not doing the same exact thing every year you go in for recurrency. I think that those two things will really help in the industry.
That's a great point. I think one of the things that we all love about public safety aviation and law enforcement aviation in particular is you never know where you're going to end up.
Yep.
Because of that, the frequencies that you would use to call SoCal or whatever approach control or whoever you're going to be talking to is going to be different based on who you are. You're not always going to be talking to the same person. So knowing who to contact and what procedure is going to be different, visually how it's going to look different, I think is a great point. So I really think that's a good idea, and just kind of diversifying your training environment that you're operating in. I think that's huge.
Yeah, and it helps too when you have management or leadership who can understand more of the challenges we have in aviation. Especially flying law enforcement. My captain he's not a pilot. He's not in aviation. He might oversee the organization, but I've had to go inadvertent before and commit and say I'm climbing my altitude. I'm going on this heading, and this is where we're going. I can't get into where I thought we were going to be able to get in. But being able to commit is a very big important thing too. Don't go back and forth between the two, but having leadership who supports that decision and doesn't blame you or ridicule you or write you up for things like that. Just, a nice, hey, that was a great choice. I'm glad that's what you did. Let's carry on.
Yeah.
I think helps.
Yeah. One other thing you brought up that I absolutely love, and I think we need to do more of, is you said train as you fight. And what comes to mind is a conversation we had with RJ Garwood on the podcast. RJ was a pilot for Huntington Beach, and he was flying with Nick Vela and unfortunately crashed off the shore of Newport Beach. And he talked about dunker training and how dunker training is really important. The one thing that can make dunker training even better is if the seatbelt configuration in the dunker platform was the same as the aircraft that you flew in. So a lot of the dunker training devices have that clasp, like the airline, commercial airline seat clasp that you use to get out of the seat, which is great. But if you're flying a A-Star 125 and you've got that rotary dial that you've got to turn, you're not training as you fight. And I think RJ's goal is to standardize that within the industry. He's talked about that quite a bit, which I think is a brilliant idea.
It is.
But training as you fight, I think is such a great idea, and it's really simplistic. That's what's so beautiful about that idea. Any insight on that, Kodey, further?
No. Oh, first of all, I love the dunker thing. It was by far that and SEER school were my two favorite parts of flight school. But I was blessed to do it through the military, and the aircraft that we are in Dunker, it was a UH-60. That's what they put us down at. So everything was the same. My seatbelt was the same. My jettison handle was the same. So I think that's great. For the civilian sector, I've done the chair before, and it'd be phenomenal to have that be the clasp. It'll be a specific seat design for the aircraft of what you're flying. That's a great idea. We fall back so much on our muscle memory that it's important, to get that primacy part down. So when you are in an event where you need to fall back on that stuff, it's just like rote memorization. It's right there. There's no question. It's the same. So yeah, train as you fight.
Yeah, I think RJ's proposal to the industry, and I think VAI, or back then HAI, was really trying to help with the idea of standardizing what the seatbelt configuration looks like with an aircraft across OEMs.
Yeah.
I think that would go far. It's not an expensive fix to a problem. So those kind of low-tech, low-cost solutions, I think, would be great. And it speaks to what you're talking about when it comes to train as you fight.
Yeah, not just for the pilot to crew, but like if you have a passenger who goes to a company in Hawaii every year for a tour, but then goes to the Grand Canyon, that passenger would be familiar with the seatbelt too. So if they needed to, they're not going through dunker training, but they would have familiarity from previous experiences that might help save them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, any insight on that?
I love what Kodey just said, and I support RJ's efforts on that too. It just makes sense because muscle memory, commonly known as System 1 now, it's used in everything, not just aviation. We talk about System 1 in firearms training all the time. You will not have time to think your way through drawing and firing at close range or a malfunction. It has to be System 1, which requires repetition and requires, concentration, and it becomes muscle memory System 1. So, and in flight, oh my gosh, there's so much System 1 stuff. And can you imagine you go to dunker training, you think, yeah, I'm good to go. This was a great experience. And now you go home and it happens. You're going to react the way you did when you hit that water in Orlando at the convention center. I mean, you're not going to react to your seatbelt buckle. You're going to react to the one that they were using. And if they're not the same, that's time that you don't have. So this is a good conversation. And especially having Kodey here with her safety background, it's good to hear your perspective. I agree 100%.
Yeah. I love these little rabbit hole conversations. This is, what we were referring to earlier. I'll get back on track a little bit. Talked about coming out of flight school, knowing that you were possibly going to deploy. Did you deploy after that? And what did those deployments look like, if so?
Yeah, so I was in Iraq 2006, 2007. So I finished flight school in 2005. So I was home for not a full year before we went to pre-mob before going overseas. Yeah, I don't know. I love deployment too. I love aviation. I just do so much. We're very lucky to be in this industry. It was quick, right? So when I finished flight school, I hadn't yet done my UH-60 class. And so I was home for a few months, went back for UH-60. And what was really nice is I went with one of the old guys, former Apache pilots. And so I got to interact with him a bit, someone from my unit who I was going to end up deploying with. And that was really nice. Before deployment, we went up to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So we were there for a few months before heading over to Kuwait. And then in Kuwait, we would do some trainings. We would do brownout landings, things like that to prep us before we crossed the berm up into Iraq.
What would you say your highlight of your deployment to Iraq would be?
That's a great question. So I think these are like little micro elements, right? So there's a couple of missions that really stand out to me. One of them I do have an air medal from. That one sticks out quite a bit. But the other stuff is, I think, just back to the fun times and the camaraderie. Like, I will never work with a group of people like I did there. And it's not because of there's not good people everywhere. It's just the stakes that we were in, the stressful situation we were in will never be the same, right? I was such an eager young pilot who wanted to fly all the time. And when you're flying air ambulance, that's hard to do, right? Because usually when you fly, something has to be happening. Your fun day might be someone else's worst day or last day. And so that's, something to take about. So there's a lot of good things. We would divvy up tasks on things that people would do. And I was the morale officer. So I'd always try to find fun things for us to do. So I would go to the dining facility. I was in Advocacy, and it was really neat. It was a very small forward operating base. It was run by the Polish. There were some Mongolians, and we were the only American team. And then there was a special forces team, and there was also a Navy SEAL team. So really small group of Americans there. But I would go to the dining facility at the end of the evening, and I would hit the dessert bar, and I would take every leftover dessert possible. And I would bring it back to where our team was, and I would make parfaits. So have this massive parfait bowl for all of us. And we would pop a movie in and we would eat parfait, like office leftover desserts. If you don't, some people don't think about it, but if there's birthdays going on, so once a month I would go to the dining facility and special order, ask for a cake, and they would make a cake for us. I did a Scottish Highlands game competition with us. And so we took like 550 cord and strapped it up, and you had to throw over a sandbag. Like that was, and we found a railroad tie. And so we're all carrying this log around trying to chuck the railroad tie. So I think that's what I miss. Like it was, we were rocketed and mortared. I just got goosebumps far more than, anyone would ever like. Like you would know when the things were leaving the tube out in the town. You're like, oh, let's go to the bunker now. Cause you just get so attuned to those things. But I love the moments that were crap that we made fun. And you have to get through those moments. And I miss those things. That sounds weird.
Those bonds can only be forged in those environments. And those are those bonds that, like you said, you can't recreate outside of those environments. The humor that we've all developed as a result of the jobs that we have to do, because otherwise you'd go crazy, right? And think of how morbid the things are that we do and see in public safety and in the military. And if you can't make light of it, then it's going to be challenging for you.
It's going to tear you up.
Yeah. I'm kind of stuck on the parfait thing. That sounds really.
It was so good. Cool. It was so fun. And it was easy to do.
The pranks are always the things I like to touch on when it comes to those environments, because, you think about the little bit of spare time you might have in your hand, and you put all these young folks together and something's going to pop up. One of the favorite pranks that I've heard, and I think it was from Al Mack, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, but he talked about how they would assault some of the tents from the other companies with Coke cans. They'd shake up the Coke cans, open the door to a tent, and throw the Coke can inside of their tent.
It's like a grenade.
Anything like that you recall?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
So I know I saw your list of questions and stuff we might talk about, but this one actually, I laughed out loud when I was reading this to myself because I was so excited to share. So I'm a bit of a tomboy. I always have been. And when we were in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, we got like a long weekend before we were getting ready to deploy, where we could just go and not do military. So we went to one of my crew chiefs, Matt. He was like, Kodey, we're going to go to this club. And he's like, you have to dress up. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. He was like, no, Kodey, I'm serious. You have to dress nice to go to this club. You can't just wear jeans and a t-shirt or whatever. And I was like, fine. So the whole group of us, we all went shopping and kind of, got some dresses or clothes or whatever we wanted to wear. And I saw this dress. First, it was like a size 12, so it was bigger. It was bigger on me, and it was very pink, very poofy, and very sparkly. And so I was like, I'm gonna get that dress. And I wasn't gonna wear this dress in its own right. It was pretty, but it was very comical to me. So we're all in our hotel room, changing, getting ready to go out, and I come out of the bathroom with this dress on. I had a side ponytail, and I pulled my socks up real high, like totally 80s. And I was like, all right, let's go. And his jaw just dropped. He's like, are you seriously wearing that? And I was like, no, but that was worth every penny this dress cost me. So what I did, though, is I took that dress to Iraq.
Oh, boy.
So I would show up at meetings, right? So it was bigger on me dress. So I'd show up at meetings, and, you got to prep for the day, and you talk about the intel threat, all these things. As much as you could plan in your ambulance, we would try to do, right? And I would put the dress on over my flight suit, and I'd wear that into our meetings, and I had fun with that, right? Because it just lightens the mood a bit. But this is the best part. So again, I was on a Polish base. The majority of the bathrooms were male and female, so everyone just used the same restroom. And then there were some separate ones if you wanted that, that's fine. So the guys would go into the bathroom, right? They use the communal bathroom, and they're in the shower. I would steal their clothes and I would leave the dress. So I have so many pictures of my fellow brethren coming out of the bathroom in this I'm teared up. This pink sparkly dress. And on me it was big, but on them it was very tight. and one of the guys was so short, and like he came into the talk, he was ticked. I am laughing. I couldn't breathe. The other guys are laughing. He sits on one of the guys' laps because this guy was like, was afraid of this guy in a dress, but it was that dress meant so much to me on deployment.
You got your money worth out of that thing. I have so many
videos.
It's the morale dress.
They were so mad at me. It was so fun.
That's classic. Well, that's called foresight that Kodey just shared with us. Thinking ahead, this dress is going to Iraq.
I wish I still had. I don't know if I think I left it for the next team because I was like, hey, you might need to use this, right?
That's cool too.
Some goats wearing it in Iraq right now.
That is awesome.
Well, you had brought up an air medal. I do want to go back and talk about that.
Yep.
I love you're humble about it. You didn't really want to park there, but I think it's important to talk about because, the circumstances you found yourself in obviously were worthy of that award and that medal. So I'd like to bring that up. And can you just share with us what happened and what came to be?
Yeah. So I will tell you, I went to I have this like tough box near my desk in my office, and I hadn't looked at this box in 15 years. And so I pulled it out the other day and I was reading it. It's nice to be reminded of things too that you have accomplished, right? So I have I only 2 air medals. One encompasses like all of the stuff that our team did while we were in Iraq. So the second one, the other one is the one that I think of the most, and it's probably one of our harder missions that we had. So I was in Adiwania, and not far from there is an area called Najaf, and I think it was an aircraft that went down. If I'm not mistaken, it was an Apache that went down. And we went over there flew over there to see if we could, land and help rescue those inside. And we were not able to land, and we orbited and orbited and orbited. And the ground crews were trying to do what they were doing. But for fuel reasons, we had to go back, to refuel. And then so we got called back, and I don't remember how much longer it was after we returned to go back over there. Because now I think it was a fight between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and one was taking the other over. There were units on the ground, American units who were taking heavy fire. So we took a flight of 3 helicopters, and we went over there because it was supposed to be like a mass casualty situation. And when we got over there, while we're on the surface after we land, a shamal came through. So huge dust storm. And I refer to those as like Mars days. If you could imagine what life on Mars would be like, that's what it would look like. Everything's red, dusty. You can only see, 10 feet in front of you maybe. And so we're on scene, and, the medics, she runs out to grab a patient. She comes back to the aircraft, and she's like, all right, let's go. I got my medic. And I look at her and I said, we're not coming back. And I said, you go back. And I was like, and you get as many people as you can to get on this aircraft, because like I said, we're not going to make it back in here. And so she did that, and we were loaded to the T. Oh. The hardest part about it is I remember there was a gentleman who was holding a little boy in the back, and there was a little girl who was sitting on the back wall, and I just remember this little girl's face looking at that little boy, and it was her brother, and he was deceased. And so, it's things like that. You don't realize how good a mission is. Even if you pick up someone on their worst day, or if it was their last day, like I'm so honored to do those things. So one of those air medals is for that mission. The whole crew, everyone received one. Our medic, she did amazing work. So now we're at the point where we have to take off, right? We're still taking fire. It's still really intense. And we're in this complete dust storm. It's a flight of 3 aircraft. So I was like, okay, we're going to take off. We were lead. So I was like, we're going to maintain this heading. We briefed IMC breakup before. I was like, you're going to go this way. In 3rd aircraft, you're going to go this way. And all of us go to our different altitudes. Luckily, we had Blue Force Tracker. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically like a knee board, an electronic knee board that can show you where everybody is. Other aircraft, you can contact ground troops and stuff. I'm sure there's better technology now that they're using. So we took off and we did our IMC breakup pretty much from the surface, and we climbed up to altitude, and we were heading back to so the little base I was on had like a small medical facility, and we were going to go there to stabilize patients before we would transfer them, right? Because now we have 3 aircraft and we're all loaded down pretty much. And so we get in, we break out of the weather. But I do remember talking about inadvertent weather. We can't see anything around us. I'm so glad I was like fresh from flight school, if you will, because I was like, trust your instruments, trust your instruments. And my crew chief's in the back. He's like, I can see the ground. I can't see the ground. I can see the ground. I was like, shut up. So I just kept telling myself, like, trust your instruments, trust your instruments. And the gentleman I was flying with, he would do the radios and stuff like that. So when we broke out, then we went back to our facility and we were able to land. And I remember he got out of the aircraft and he just walked around and he's crying. He just hugs me. Then that was just such a unique moment to that. I'm so glad that I had recency of experience with being in the clouds from flight training, that it really helped us. But, such an amazing crew, such an amazing mission, and that we were able to help so many people. Of course, I wish we could have gone back, but.
That's cool. What
incredible.
What an experience.
Yeah.
I kind of thought back to, you talked about walking through the hangar and putting your head in the Kelly and asking the mechanics, what if I take around here? What if I take around there? And as you're descending into this environment, I'm thinking about how that probably benefited you, at least from a peace of mind, knowing what's vital and what's not. So it's interesting how those things that you do with intention come back to pay dividends down the road. And I think that's important to consider. How we invest our time when we're at work and outside of work as well. But all of those different things you talked about, it's got to be so impactful for the later parts of your career, and how it taught you to respond to these things, and how you taught later, and some of the safety practices you've developed as a result of the experiences you've had. One question I have is, in the dust storm flying, I think we can all kind of visualize what it looked like visually, but how did it feel? Was it turbulent? Was there a different feel when you were flying in that dust storm? What was that like?
Yeah, so it wasn't turbulent at all. Again, I think it was just more of the cognitive side of things. Like, I definitely went back to trust your instruments, and I love telling myself that while I was going through that. Definitely compartmentalizing and not listening to my crew chief in the back, who could tell me he could see, not listening to the other pilot work the radios, but just focus on that instrumentation to make sure my attitude, altitude, airspeed, everything was on point to get me out of that area safely, right? And I really loved having the ability of the Blue Force tracker to say, hey, there's our 2 other aircraft, so we're not starting to converge back on each other. We're all maintaining what we're supposed to be doing to ensure safe separation. I just felt very calm. Again, I'm that type of person. When I get in those environments, I feel eerily calm.
You're at home.
It's a good trait.
Yeah. Yeah. The CRM that came in that specific situation is huge. On that, through that specific experience, have you relied on that as part of your teachings as you've gone forward?
I think when it comes to those experiences, I have a sense of discipline and accountability, and focus on teamwork from those situations, right? Being decisive under pressure can really help. And I think for me, when I go to teach, teaching someone from ground zero is, it's not just about you. You have to focus on your crew as a whole. If you have patients on board, you're taking, your actions into consideration when they're on board. I just try to give them a sense of like, why are you doing what you're doing? And is it the right thing to be doing right now? Or, hey, let me give you a different scenario or situation. For example, when I was at the flight school I was teaching at, they would teach a confined area and they would only turn right because the pilot sat on the right side. And I was like, well, what about your medic or your TFO who also needs to see the scene? Like, or what if we have to turn left? And they're like, oh, we never thought about it. We weren't teaching it that way because the pilot sits on the right. Like, it's not just about your pilot. For me, my crew chiefs are invaluable. My TFO, an invaluable set of eyes, and you learn to trust them and you help guide each other. And so I would just bring those real world applications with me when I would come to teach.
I love that. We do what we do because it's what we've always done,
Yeah.
And law enforcement, at least in my experience, for us, most of the time it's left-hand orbits. We're all good in the left-hand orbit. You tell me to do a right-hand orbit and it's going to be the worst orbit you've ever seen in your life. Right, Jack?
Yep. Absolutely true. We're just like NASCAR. Just turn left.
Yeah. But yeah,
Keep turning left, Ricky Bobby. You'll be fine.
Another left turn.
coming out of the military, your career has hit warp speed, it seems, since that time. Can you talk about leaving the military and what you did thereafter?
Yeah, so obviously transitioning from the military to the civilian is a significant step for anyone. I think for me, I found it, well, first of all, I took some time off. I took almost a year off, and I just, I would hang out with friends and try to spend time with family, and I really focused on just like getting myself back to norm, if you will, because I was definitely different upon return home. But when it came to the point of flying again, I remember I was trying to look at jobs in the Gulf, and I called one company, and the gentleman on the phone, he was very nice, and he spoke to me, and he's like, we're not going to hire you. And he's like, you don't understand power management because you've had these two, large twin turbine engines. And he's like, you don't understand power management. And I was like, I don't know if I agree with that. Like, obviously you've never lost an engine, in the middle of the Middle East and had that experience. And so it was just a neat concept. I was like, what do you mean I don't understand it? Like, I've had some really great training. I completely do. And if you think I don't, I'm completely able to learn. Like teach me. Fine. So it was really hard to find a civilian job at first. And through a networking connection, through an associate, someone put me in contact with a gentleman who worked at Bristow Academy here in Titusville, Florida. He did business development. And he's like, you should come here and teach. I was like, oh man, teach. Okay, cool. So I went and got my CFI, my double I, and then I started teaching there. And a really quick, funny, small note is when I was in my CFI class, I'm looking around, I'm like, man, everyone in the room at, 160 flight hours, and they're getting ready to go teach. And I was like, what do you know about aviation?
Yeah.
Because in the military, it's quite opposite. Your flight instructors are more senior. And so that was a weird concept for me, is like, people just go right from learning to teach to build hours because they want to get the job they want, where in the military, that's really reversed. I
do agree with you. I feel like that's a broken part of the aviation industry. It just doesn't make any sense to me. What you experienced, having your experience and bringing that as a CFI in, and Jack, same for you. You had a lot of experience as a operator before you were a CFI, and were they able to bring that back to the folks you're teaching? In your position of influence, Kodey, how do we change that? How do we affect change in that part of the industry?
I'd make it obtainable for people who want to teach, because there are older people who want, and I don't mean 80 years old, but there are, people my age, 45 to 50 years old, 65, who want to teach, who want to mentor and pass down the knowledge that they've gained from all their years of flying. Make it, obtainable. Actually pay a good salary, offer a good schedule. That's, sadly it comes down to money. People don't flight instruct because flight instructors aren't really paid. And they're typically only paid when they're with a student. So if I'm doing all of the paperwork or the IACRA work or that stuff, you're not getting compensated for any of that time. So it's when you're ground teaching or teaching in flight. So, I think that should really change. Make it an incentive. Change how we think about flight instructors. Oh, I'm just a flight instructor. Like, you are molding the next people who are going to carry passengers in the back, might carry your kid, who might pick you up and take you to the hospital, who might save your family if their house is on fire or criminal activities around. Just make it more enticing for those who want to pay it forward and come back and mentor and teach. And I think that's a huge deficit in the civilian world.
Yeah, the economics is such a big part of it, because flight training is expensive now. And if you start paying CFIs, which they deserve to get paid more, but you base it on more experience, if you pay more, that per hour rate's going to go up now for learning to fly. So it's like this balancing act that has to be done. I agree with you completely, Kodey. It should be like the military does, where a lot more experienced people are teaching. Not to say that there aren't some incredible instructors that, they get their CFI, they get into a cockpit and they're gifted.
They're great. Yeah.
They're out there. I mean, there's a lot out there, but you can be a great instructor. And because you don't have the experience that someone with 1,000 hours or 5,000 hours has, if something comes up, you're going to react differently, and maybe not in the correct way. So it's a tough topic. I like your thoughts on it, because it should change, but we'll see. Economics is a powerful thing.
Yeah, or even just bringing a couple senior, flight instructors to help mentor.
That's a good start.
Yeah, to help mentor the younger ones as they're coming through.
So you go and spend time as a CFI, and then eventually you wind up at a law enforcement agency. Can you talk about how you moved into that law enforcement role and what your experience was there?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Wysong Enterprises. Wysong Enterprises offers specialty rotorcraft completion facility, focusing on solutions and installs for customers in various industries, including EMS, law enforcement, energy utility, forestry, tourism, security, and corporate applications across major OEM platforms. Visit us at wysongusa.com.
Thanks to our sponsor, AEM, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions. Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 160-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Kodey Bogart as we explored our incredible journey from military service as a Black Hawk pilot to her current role as an industry safety expert and author. Kodey's insights about the critical importance of safety practices in aviation and the vital role helicopters play in emergency response are invaluable, especially in the context of the growing collaboration between drones and helicopters during disasters. Her reflection on community service and hurricane responses emphasized the profound impact aviation can have in times of crisis. Throughout this series, we've shared memorable stories from Kodey's time in flight school and her military deployments, showcasing the strong peer support and camaraderie that come into play in high-stress environments. Her experiences highlight the challenges of transitioning to civilian life and the pressing issues facing law enforcement aviation today, such as recruitment or retention. We also touched upon the importance of advocacy for women in aviation and the significance of Kodey's children's book series, Helo Girls, which aims to educate and inspire the next generation of aviators. Thank you for tuning in. We encourage you to like and subscribe for more insightful discussions and expert perspectives on the Hangar Z podcast. Cheers.